Hello. Today I'm here to explain to you how my Fox Origin data pack works and show you every single method I use to make it work. Now, I suggest you watch my previous video. It shows you an example of it working in game, and here I'll only be showing you how I got it. By the way, for data pack making, I recommend Visual Studio Code. It also has a very good extension for data pack making called Datapack Helper Plus. Recommend you use it. Anyway, let's get to it then. First things first, we got the origins, Fox and Fox. Fox is only responsible for, Fox is human form. This is human form. This is Fox form. That is the only difference between the two. Whenever you're in Fox form, both have one common thing. Well, two common things. Transformation and F5. Those are the two powers they share. And Fox body is something added when you're in Fox form. Besides that, they're both exactly the same and you can't tell the difference. Because the description's the same, the name's the same, the icon's the same. You can't tell. So, transformation is where it changes you back and forth. This is stored by a resource. This resource is kept between the two since they share the same power. When it's 1, you're in Fox, you're in human form. When it's 0, you're in Fox form. Now, this right here, whenever it's 1, it runs a function. It runs as entity action Fox loop function, which loops every single tick while you are in Fox form. And when it begins being in Fox form, it runs transform. And when it ends being in Fox form, it runs human transform. And over here, this is control. It allows you to activate it on and off with an if else. And if it's on, if Fox form is 1, set it to 0. If it's 0, set it to 1. Simple as that. Activates with primary. Then there's F5, which all this guy does. It stores whether or not you're in first person mode, third person mode, or whatever. It goes from 0 to 3, and when it reaches 3, it sets itself back to 0, which means it goes 0, 1, 2. Those are the only values it can save. And whenever you press toggle your perspective, it adds 1 to this, allowing me to check what perspective you are in. Then in Fox body, it makes you invulnerable to sweet berries. It prevents entity collisions. This stops you from being pushed by the fox that's inside of you. This right here makes it so that when you're sprinting, you get tag sprint, and when you're not sprinting, you remove the tag sprint. This is so the functions can detect it. Same thing with sneaking, same thing with moving, and also for moving, it's a little bit special in that when you're moving, it adds 1 to a special scoreboard. When you start moving, it sets your moving to 0 and gives you the tag moving. When you stop moving, it sets your moving to 0. It removes the tag moving. And as well as that, there's a second part that makes it so that when you are not moving, it removes moving, making it so that if it's negative 100, you've been not moving for 100 ticks. But if it's positive 100, you've been moving for 100 ticks. That's all this does, so that I can detect how long you've been moving and how long you've not been moving, so that I can use it in these functions. Invisibility makes you invisible. This right here prevents entity render, which prevents the fox from being visible to you. This is only active when your F5 is 0. When you're in first person mode. And when the entity is within a certain distance, and when the entity has the power of Fox, which is the power that's given to the fox when it's summoned, which I will show you that later. And then in phasing, it makes you phase everything in the tag fox pass, which is only a few things. Inside of that tag is sweet berry, bushes, and leaves. I did leaves because I thought it'd be neat. Anyway, this right here makes it so you can't wear any armor. This right here makes it so that you jump better when you're sneaking and sprinting at the same time. And this right here gives you the tag flying when you're flying in creative mode. That's all these powers do. They don't do much. But where the real magic happens is in these functions. Fox Transform begins the transformation. When you first transform into a fox, this activates. It summons the fox. It sets your origin to your fox form origin. And this right here gives your fox a link between you and the fox. Watch this video here if you want to know more about that technique, but I'll explain it basically here. So basically, you get your fox. You summon your fox. It has a special tag on it called player. And then you get your person here, which is at S. We can always find you, the player. So that's just fine. The player is executing it. And now, this G value is added every single time a fox is summoned. And this G value is set to you and set to the fox. And it only does it when the fox does not have the tag summoned. Which, after this is all over, it gives the fox the tag summoned. This stops any other foxes that already exist in the world from being affected by these two commands, making it so that only you, the player who activated this, and the fox have the same scoreboard value, which means I can detect that and find the fox with the same scoreboard value as you, and run a command on it. This is how it works. I'll show you how to do that in a bit. This right here gives your fox its properties. It gives it the power fox to make the F5 thing work, and it changes its hitbox and hitbox height to be very, very small, so you can't hit it very easily, and the player's hitbox covers it. And then it marks the fox so that it's not affected whenever another fox is summoned, and so its ID is kept and not affected. And then it sets your scales, which it changes it to match that of a fox. It also sets the persistence and the delay, so that it happens instantly, and when you die, it doesn't go away. This right here changes your speed. Over here, it adds some particles and a sound. Quite simple. Well, not really, but yeah. I kinda went through that fast, but I think I explained it well enough. The key part really is this linking mechanism. This is the key part of this. And the rest of these stuff is just to make it better. Setting your scale to match the fox is pretty important, because all this does right here is it makes your hitbox the same size as a real fox. Since the fox's hitbox is very small and can't be hit, then your hitbox has to cover the fox's, and it changes your hitbox to be the same as the fox's normally, without it being changed. And as for this ID, it's just to find the fox and find which fox you specifically summoned. Anyway, fox loop. This loops every single tick when you are a fox. This TPs the fox to you and only your fox. It executes at you and adds every single fox in the world with the tag player, which the fox that you summon is the tagged player, which means only foxes that are summoned is selected here. And then, if the score of the fox is the same as your score, then rotate it as you without any up and down, a little bit behind you so as to not get in your way when you look straight down, and rotate it as you again. It TPs the fox to you. And over here, this is for when the fox is not sleeping. This is for when the fox is, because the fox, when it's sleeping, its position changes a little bit and its rotation messes up a little bit. Anyway, this right here is to reset F5, since if you spam your F5 key, the cooldown cannot keep up, and thus it can't make sure this number is accurate. In order to get around that, I added the /trigger command that allows you to do that. Reset F5 is a /trigger command, and whenever it's above 1, which you can do with /trigger and then reset F5, it will reset your resource to 0. Simple as that. This gets made in the loop function, which I'll explore a little bit later. This is for sitting and sneaking. Makes it so that when you crouch, your fox sneaks, and if you're sneaking and move, it does that odd wiggling motion. So, when you have to tag sneak and are not moving and not flying, then it will set the sitting value of the fox to 1. And as well as that, will also set the crouching to 0. And we'll set the eye height, your eye height, to be different, since the fox's eyes move up when it sits. And then when you're sneaking and not moving, and unless this is true, meaning when this stuff is not true, it's going to reset your eye height. That's all that's for. Now over here, we got the for sneaking, meaning you're sneaking, and when you are moving, then what it will do is it will set crouching to 1 and sitting to 0, which is the reverse of up here, since you're moving this time, and it should be doing that little wiggling motion. And when you're not sneaking at all, it will set both to 0. That's just to make sure everything works out. Now for sleeping, it's a little bit more complicated, because I want to make it so that you go to sleep if you stand on something not moving for 500 ticks. Which is the reason why the movement thing is a little bit more complicated than everything else inside the powers. If your movement score is less than negative 499, if your movement score is bigger than 499, well, negative 499, then it will remove the tag sleeping, and it will set the sleeping score to 0 for the, it will set the sleeping pose for the fox to 0, meaning it's not sleeping anymore. This is to reset it and make sure that if you are moving, or if you haven't sat still long enough, it makes sure your fox is not sleeping. Now, unless the block is fox sleep, which fox sleep includes carpets, walls, beds, and moss carpets, and unless the block underneath you is fox sleep, meaning it requires both of these. It requires both of these to not be fox sleeping blocks. Then it will remove sleeping and let sleeping to 0B. Meaning you cannot sleep when there's nothing to sleep on. That's all this does. You cannot sleep when there's nothing to sleep on. Then over here, if it's bigger than negative 500, less than negative 500 I should say, then and if you're on top of a sleeping block or a sleeping block's beneath you, then it'll make your fox sleep. Give you the tag sleeping and give you and modify your fox's data to be sleeping 1. And then this right here copies your item in your hand to the fox's mouth. This is all this does. It's a simple data command. That's all it does. And this right here makes sure the F5 score is equal to the resource within F5 power. Now, that's it for this loop here. And then for human transform, it's pretty much the reverse of fox transform, but it requires a little bit less, since we're not making a fox here. It sets your origin to human form, and it sets your resource for it sets your transformation to 0, meaning you're no longer a fox. And it kills your fox by teleporting it to the void, which what it does is it teleports it 999 blocks down, and then it removes its tag, making it special. And thus, the void just kills it. That's it. And then it sets your scale. Oh, and the reason why I TP it to the void instead of using a /kill command is because I do not want smoke particles from it dying, or any loot from it. Because, like, if you're using a pig or something, it will drop pork chops if you use the /kill command. The reason why this is here is to stop it from dropping anything and making particles. This right here sets your scale back to normal. This right here changes your speed back to normal and displays some particles and sounds. Alright, now we're nearly done. Now load here triggers as soon as you reload the game or load this data pack. It adds all the scoreboards I used for all of this. And then it checks if you have Pekui installed and Origins installed, so that it can give you a warning if you do not. If you do not have Pekui installed, it will tell you, please to install Pekui. Just to let you know, this Origin will not work if you do not have Pekui installed. And same thing with Origins, because, yeah, it will not work at all without Origins. And how it detects this, it sets a scoreboard value to 0, and then in the Fox Pekui function, it will run a Pekui command that does literally nothing. And it will set Pekui score to 1. Now you see, when a function has an error, it will not work at all. It will not even load, which means when we use the function command and load, it will not change 0 to 1, because it's not there, this function, because this command is not there. And same thing with Origins. Both these commands do nothing. All they are is just to detect if the mod is installed. And it'll give you an error if it isn't. As simple as that. And then for loop, this right here will kill foxes if they do not have a power. If they do not have a player. If you log out, for example, the fox should also die and go away. So what this does is it removes every single fox's has player tag, and then if it has a player, it gives it the has player tag. And then if it does not have a player by then, it will teleport it into the void. As simple as that. This will make sure that if you log out, your fox disappears too. And that is it. Yep, that's it. Besides the fact that it has a load command function in the tags and a tick function in the tags too, and that I just added them to here. Yeah. Oh, and also for the fox form, it's unchoosable, meaning it won't appear in the menu, meaning you can only see this guy. So yeah. And that is how I did it. I hope you enjoyed this explanation video, and I hope this can allow you to figure out how to make cool data packs that allow you to transform into mobs, or, like, I don't know, do something a little bit more interesting than just having the regular old player. Like, I made a data pack once where the player became a bunch of particles and was invisible. You can do something a little bit more. Or you can also edit the mob using powers, like, for example, in its form, you could give the fox a power, like I did here, and just make that power change its color, or make it bigger, or all sorts of things, really. Just do something. I like origins that do something cool. So, I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was educational, and I hope this wasn't too crazy, as this was my first time making a video like this where I explain an origin. I may make more. I don't know. Anyway, enjoy this video and subscribe and all that. Talk to you later.